Well, the time is 6 o'clock, at least 6 o'clock in South Africa. It could be 4 in the afternoon in the UK. It could be 1 in the morning in the US, etc., in different countries. But it's 6 o'clock in South Africa. And welcome to Patko Mafani Conversations. And what a pleasure for us this Thursday, as you know, that every Thursday we host South African leaders and some from the political arena, some from business. We've hosted a couple of business people and some from sport, some from arts and culture, some from media and entertainment. And what a pleasure for me now to host. And I think because of COVID-19, we've also had an opportunity to host at some stage Undaba Mandela owangena apha eprogramini esithi, hi, my name is Ndaba Mandela. Abantu babhideka. I said, hi, my name is Ndaba Mandela. Yeah. And this afternoon, wow, this evening, what a pleasure to host Ndileka Mandela, abaninzi bamazi njengomzukulwana katata. Ayisuki ke le nto, and it is so difficult to talk about any of the children or grandchildren and even nephews and nieces and all of that, and cats and dogs. It becomes so difficult to detach the Mandela factor. In conversation this evening, ladies and gentlemen, with an author. Oh, what a pleasure for me to host another author. An author, a social activist, a former nurse in the ICU, and also a leader of a rural upliftment organization, ethiwe ngutatakhe Tatuthembekile Madiba Mandela. And Sister Ndileka Molo wethu Madlomo. I call her Madlomo. Right, Madlomo. It's good to have you.
Thank
It's
you.
good to have
Thank you. Ndibulise abantu ababukeleyo nam ndiyavuya uba ude wandihosta. Your conversations are robust. Your conversations they prick the mind and make people think. I'm quite chuffed that you invited me to speak to you today, and also as a fellow author.
I was not feeling well this afternoon, but I said, I've got to get well. Let me take a nap. I think I took a 2.5 hours nap, and I said, nah, I can't let this show down, and I have to be here because Lamatuba Angabile. But Madlomo, indeed, as I said earlier on, is there anything called privacy with the Mandela family?
Hardly ever, Patko, and it's quite frustrating at times. While we understand that we are the family that we are, and but moments of privacy to regroup sometimes are needed. Never has that been so stark as the time that granddad was sick, especially in 2013. I remember the first time that, I went to the hospital, stepping out of that hospital in Pretoria. It was like literally I was on the red carpet because all I could hear was, the speed cameras.
The sound of the camera.
The sound of the camera. And, you can't, the lack of privacy is a double whammy because oftentimes, while you're still regrouping and processing what has happened within the family, you are bombarded with the media, with friends, everybody that is wanting to know what's happening, specifically the media. That to me has been problematic, specifically when granddad was sick, because at the time, my daughter was at UCT. So on the one side, I'm trying to pacify her, to say to her, no, we are handling things at home. And then there is a media report that he's critical. Ndileka, I remember one time reading a news article that I've been at a hospital from this time to this time. I'm thinking, Jesus, Are people really monitoring me and putting me on the clock? So that's the lack of privacy that we don't have. We don't have the luxury of having. The flip side of that coin is that when we are bereaved, our pain is not ours alone. The country, the world carries that pain with us, which is a wonderful thing. Not everybody is able to have that support of people that abakwazi ukhala nawe, So it's a double-edged sword, that lack of
It
privacy.
is. It is. Allow me to say, it is the price and price of greatness. There's a price you pay for it, the lack of
Yeah.
privacy, but kuphinde kubekho amaqithiqithi, as you say that inhlungu yasekhaya iba inhlungu yesizwe, and I like that, and sometimes it could kick doors open as well. I'm trying to imagine.
Yes, it does, to a certain extent, to a certain degree. It allows me, for instance, when I went to Tunisia in 2017, I went there as a civilian because I was invited for a cultural event that was in the middle of the desert in Duz. But by virtue of me being the granddaughter of this iconic man, I got to meet the president of that country. I was not there on official business or political business. I was there as a civilian. So you get to enter spaces that ordinarily I would not have entered had I not been the granddaughter of this person. So it does open doors at times. However, I must categorically say that in the country, it doesn't, because oftentimes people think that we live in a lap of luxury. We have everything. Izinto zihamba mthebelele nje. Xa uya one of these corporate companies as a foundation uthi ufuna a donation, they just ask you, they give a blank check. No, the only person that was able to do that was Granddad. I mean, and the reason why he could is because he had paid his dues to humanity. And we also have to pay our dues to humanity to have those doors open to us. Yes, internationally, those doors are starting to open to me because of the work that I do. But also, it did not come easy. I had to prove myself with the work that I do that those doors are open to me.
When you say that granddad used to do that, it used to happen easily with him. You remind me of a story Uputbantu Olomisa told me. A city babese London, and other people, and to raise funds for the ANC towards the first democratic elections. Uthi Uputbantu bayibamba ke le meeting wapresenta umkhulu ba, I have come here to raise funds. In fact, to fundraise for the ANC as we approach the elections. I want 1 million. Bantu ndamjonga uba umkhulu ibiza lula le mali. And then bathe xa bedibana bodwa belungu phaa bebhunga, naye wabhunga apha umkhulu wathi bantu, we must make sure basenika le mali izinkozo.
No, when it comes to that, he did not play games. He just did not play games when it comes to that. And the thing is, what I liked about him is that he would, when ordinary people would say, ask for perhaps 10 million, Granddad would say, I'll ask for 1 million because I'm sure that I'll get 1 million from this group of people, and as another million from that group of people. So he was a strategist of note through and through, be it fundraising, be it in politics, be it even at home. He was just a strategist.
But let's come back and talk a bit about Ndileka. This, shall I call it a philosophy or belief that you are first Ndileka before being Mandela? I am Ndileka. Even your book is titled that way, Ndileka. And what brought this about?
It's because as Ndileka, I have battled to find my voice. within the family. People often think that, if you're a Mandela, it's easy to be heard. That voice is stifled within the family because you belong to this iconic family, which I would term a tribe. And there's tribe rules that you have to conform to, you know? And because I've always been a nonconformist after my grandfather and my grandmother, so I've battled to fit in a certain mode because I've always been a person that shoots from the hip and say whatever comes to the mouth, And so I had to stifle my voice a lot of the time and say, whoa, uzawuthwani xa ndithi. So, and I also had to step out the shadow of being granddad's, Madiba's granddaughter, and have my voice heard. I am Ndileka first, then I'm a Mandela. And this, I'm always butting heads, even on social media, because people tend to box me that this is how you should behave. This is how you should respond to a certain thing because of what your grandfather would have said. And I said, no, I can't, because I am not a clone of Madiba. I am my own person. I'm now in my mid-50s. I'm a grandmother. What am I going to be teaching my granddaughter if I'm a clone of a person? I can't be me. And that's why I had to step out of that shadow. Oftentimes I would be described as Ndileka, the granddaughter of, but now I'm now Ndileka, the author. There you go.
Yeah. I think that's important. That's important. It's important because sometimes it happens when one is in the shadow of a famous, iconic person, like you're saying. And it is also important because one's individuality also can disappear because they are in a marriage of a well-known person. For instance, Unkosikazi Mamqenebe, she consistently wants to do projects where she will be Bongi first before she's Bongi Mafani. And I understand exactly where you're coming from, wife off,
Yeah.
and yes, and now I encourage her, go to school, study so you can make your mark in South Africa just as Bongi first, and I think that's important. It's important not only for children or grandchildren of iconic, well-known, famous people, but also in terms of spouses, particularly ladies, young ladies that get into marriages with well-known people. I am glad you mentioned this because we, the so-called known people, should give our children and give our partners that space to become themselves. So thank you for mentioning this. But just quickly talking about I am Ndileka, let me get into the gap when it comes to that and say, tell me a bit about the book then. I am Ndileka. Let's talk as authors. I can tell you about the price and prize of greatness, but tell me about I am Ndileka, the book.
Well, the book was prompted by a myriad of reasons. One is that oftentimes as African people, our storytelling has always been in oral form. And the challenge with oral form of storytelling is that it gets diluted from time to time as generations go because it's not documented in its authentic state. So I had to write my story in my own voice. Whether it was published or not, it was not an issue. I just had to put pen to paper and document it so that to time infinite, my children will hear my story from my narrative, not somebody else telling it. I had to still tell that story on my own. That's number one. Number two is that in the life and in the life continuum of my grandfather, there exists but one narrative, and that narrative is that of Mangutjan. The children of Untoko or Unomatamsanga Mase owatshata noDalibunga, intombi yasengcwebe eMequthubeni, is very obscure in the life of Madiba. And I believe that the story of my grandfather was not complete because the fact that his wife is mentioned, yes, he bore him 2 sons and a girl, and boom, that's the sum total of who Evelyn Nomathamsanqa was. And because I'm the first of the first of the first, it lay upon my shoulders to make sure that the story of Evelyn is heard. The story of Thembekile is heard more than just a son that died in a tragic accident in 1969. So I had to tell this story for my children so that they can be able to know where they come from and also to put into perspective the life of Madiba, because in all the books that have been written about Madiba, the life of him as a father, grandfather, great-grandfather, husband, uncle has never been written. It is a political story as if that's the sum total of a person, and it was not complete. So I had to fill in the missing pockets with my story, I Am Ndileka.
Well, thanks also for contextualizing that this evening my guest is the firstborn of the first son of the first wife, the first of the first of the first. That's important. And do you think you had a special, do you think you had a special place in his heart because of that?
Yes, I did. I mean, with Granddad, whenever he looked at me, especially myself and my sister, because we're most closely to Anzini and Anzinzi in age, and because
Yes.
whenever Granddad looked at me and Nandi, wayibona uThembekile, finish and clear. There was just no two ways about it. He treated me and my sister till the day he died as his children, not grandchildren. So even for the first time that I met him in Robben Island, I mean, utatomkhulu ndandimazi ngeleta from the time I was 10 years old, that, and he wrote to me, I remember the first letter that he wrote to me, that I'm looking forward that in the next 5 years I'll be seeing him. Must have been about 11. And typical of me, you know, being the vain person that I am, utatomkhulu ucela izinto mos, so ndibhalela etrongweni mandicela idyasi ene-fair up. Yabona kudala izinto ndazithanda with fair on the neck. And he just wrote back to me that, no, I don't have money. Le nto uba wayesetrongweni kum yayingekho engqondweni yam until I went to Robben Island. And it was with Granddad, I mean, we fell in love, the both of us, the first time we saw each other. I mean, there came this man in green prison cabs, tall as ever. You know, no, actually, you when you go to Robben Island, when you revisited political prisoners, you go there last and you find them sitting because they wouldn't want you to know or tell the outside world how tall he was. So he was sitting there with Gregory, his warden.
Really? Was that a big deal in the Maya height?
Yes. Yeah, well, you know, I don't know what they thought, you know, you go and tell them about, you know. And he then says to me, okay, I must stand far away so that he could see how tall I was. But Granddad, you know, I always say that he would charm bees out of a beehive. In 5 minutes, I mean, the first visit was 30 minutes. Can you imagine, Patko, how cruel and vindictive apartheid was? Here it is that Granddad is seeing his eldest grandchild. And this is the age that he had last seen my father alive, at the age of 16. And he's seeing me for the first time, and the visit is just 30 minutes. You know, he said I must stand far away so that he could see me. And he made me relax. In 5 minutes flat, he was asking me about the boyfriends, about pap smears, about what I want to do at school. I mean, I don't know where that 30 minutes went. Boom, flat, it was gone. And what is important to note is that, you know, because you see a person first, I'm seeing him the first time at the age of 16. I can't even touch him. You have to kiss a window, you have to touch a window, a glass panel that you have to touch him through. And it was also my first ferry ride on the boat. I've never been on the boat before. But the strange thing is that although Aunt Maki had been and Aunt Mahatu had been to Robben Island, they never prepared me to say, this is what you're going to be confronted with, because it's just strange. And being children of political prisoners and stalwarts, you get to normalize what is not normal. Because seeing your grandfather under constraint and not being able to, it's abnormal.
Yeah.
But you learn to be able to make the new normal of not being able to touch.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Wow. That's interesting. And at some stage, I think it got very emotional, um, with you and Nabo, um, or Zinzi and the entire family. But let's come back to Ndileka a little bit again. Our conversation is intertwined. I'm interested in the person Ndileka, but somehow on the way we'll be pulling one or two things about granddad, which is natural. But one of the things that we easily recollect when the name Ndileka Mandela is mentioned is the fact that you're a social activist. What's the drive behind this, and where does one get to see your social consciousness in action?
Well, I think yabona how khula is you, and oftentimes people would reference that to my grandfather being a social activist, but it doesn't come from him per se. You know, it is something that I was brought up with. I mean, I grew up being privileged, really, because I had two grandmothers, my maternal and paternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother lived in Cape Town. That's the person that would take me to the docks when I would visit granddad. But she spoiled me rotten in terms of buying me the latest designer clothes. So I grew up with a lot of clothes. And my grandmother taught me to share, even then, that if there is a person that is lacking, I must give off the clothes I have, because wayedla ngokuthi hey Ndileka ninemfucumfucu eninzi igqithe empahla nje ongasoze ukwazi uyinxiba nenye into, phungulani impahla, because every December and June and December I would go to Cape Town and come with suitcases of new clothes. So I grew up being this person that was conscious of another person's suffering. That's one. My grandmother also ran a general dealership in Kofumbabo. Oh, yeah, zazizavenkile zithengisa ibhokisi somngcwabo to i-onopoji. So sasikhule ngolo hlobo. And my grandmother wayelingqina likayehova. So wayedla ngokweletisa abantu, and xa bengakwazi ubhatala, she never pressed those people. So I grew up with that mentality that you have got to be empathetic to a person that is lacking. So that was my mentality. And also to couple that up, I became a nurse. But becoming like a robust social activist dates back to 2012 after granddad got sick. Yabona uDalibunga ugule ngo-2011. nda-approachwa ngubhutjiyos wasengcobo, ongumeya wasengcobo ngo-2012 before i-birthday katatomkhulu. Wathi Ndileka, iClarkebury ihlelelekile and kudala ndikhe ndincokole nobhuti wakho uZwelivelile, but ndiyabona uxakekile, ngayi-adopthe, ubone uba wenza ntoni. And it happened at a time I was toying because I had stopped working and I was toying at what to do with my life. And I believe that there comes a point in a person's life, why did God put me on earth? What is my purpose? And it was at the time that I was searching for my purpose in life that Lamla Jose, approached me. And that yabona Butlamla utatomkhulu ndiyambona uba ndiyamazi uba ixesha lakhe emhlabeni alikho lide kakhulu. On the 18th, I will spend time with him, but I will make sure that I come to Clarkebury. Ndaya ke Clarkebury ndayibona nyhani bayihlelekile, because nam ndakhe ndaya eClarkebury for a brief stint before I fell pregnant with my first son. I-hostel le sasihlala kuyo had burnt down, and the one that was new had been vandalized when Ukada Asma stopped it being Teacher Training College. It was then that the seed for the Tembekile Mandela Foundation was born. Reason for that is that why I named it Tembekile. I named it Tembekile because that's the pain that Granddad never healed of, to an extent that Granddad would shut down completely, to an extent that I stopped asking about Dad in a quest to know who my father was. So I elected to keep his memory alive through the good works that I would do through this foundation. And the reason why I actually zoomed in on the two pillars that Granddad felt were necessary in a thriving society, education and health, is that Nelson Mandela Foundation was no longer doing the programs that Granddad had started. If you are Kumbula Waidlango Resi Funds Eyakhe School, it is now a center of memory, responsible for advocacy work and dialogue. So Tata as program this fake upper, and then he gave it his blessing. But it was only after he had died that I started being hands-on on the Tembekile Mandela Foundation. And that's the work that I do in the term in the sense of social activism, because we're doing mainly in rural areas. One of our flagship programs is Pride of the Rural Girl, where we raise funds to buy sanitary wear for rural girls. Because in South Africa they can't go to school because of menstruation, which is a rite of passage. So we do that work. And the one that we still would love to see it being realized is leveraging on the fourth industrial revolution in terms of computer labs, science laboratories, libraries, and sports facilities, where we build centers of excellence in one village that can service a lot of schools, because my gripe is that abaninzi abantwana abanikhono ezilalini kodwa uba izinto they are not exposed to certain things, they fall through the cracks, because all you need really in life is a person to just give you a chance. So that's the work I do.
Wow, that's quite noble. That's quite noble. But another episode of your life that just touched me now, and when I would nje kuyo, was the relationship or the no relationship with the father. Utatu Tembekile, Madiba's firstborn. How old were you when he unfortunately left us?
I was 4 years old. And I have two memories of Dad. Actually three. The first one, he had bought me a tricycle, and it's actually Orlando location. In Orlando, Orlando East, just at the point where it meets a deep kloof. It was separated by a street. So one thing a bicycle, and he was pushing on the bicycle, and I fell. And that was one. And the other one was when he had bought me a cowboy outfit. And in the boyfriend and being one was when he would this cowboy outfit, and he had, with the gun horse and the Stetson hat. This is my dad. And the other one is not such a hit one, because it was during his funeral. Because it was, I remember, it's amazing how I still have this vivid memory. Ndimboniswa ekamereni evalwe ngevili ebusweni, ndibuza uba kutheni ngathi udark nje, nomama ekhala emotweni, umakhulu esithi no, you mustn't cry because you will scare the child. So those are the sporadic memories I have of Dad. But in essence, Granddad was my father. That's why we had this special relationship and bond with him, because in as far as fatherhood is concerned, everything that is man to me is Granddad. He filled in that gap of a father for me.
Even if that began physically when you were 15 years old and going forward, even that connection, the letters, the requests, bring this and blah blah blah, and going forward, and up to the time when he started getting sick in 2011, and you really played your part. You enjoyed his fatherhood. I remember we probably last saw the best of him in public during the 2010 FIFA World Cup, when he was taken on a golf cart around the stadium. And those of us that were literally and physically in the bowl at FNB Stadium, it must have been the last time we got to see him like this before he fell sick. But again, back to Ndileka. Before the social activist, and I'm glad that you've unpacked your social consciousness. And before all of that, you were once an ICU nurse. And I'm trying to imagine, because these were the cruel, dark days of apartheid. And as a nurse practicing those days, the Mandela factor again must have had a knock-on effect on how the hospital, either the hospital management or fellow staff or other hospital stakeholders perceived you. Probably disadvantaged you because he was still in incarceration and apartheid was burning at that time. Tell me about you being a young nurse, and your surname is that of this man that the system would arrest us even for having a picture of Mandela, let alone a t-shirt. T-shirt is too much. Just a picture, just a picture. You would never afford to have a Mandela. Indlela awayemweka ngayo amabhulu leyo uMandela. Now, then there is this young nurse. No, this must have been complicated. I want to hear this.
This is when you have to love a trans guy, because there I was a trans guy at the time. So I trained at Len Grey, general nursing, then midwifery in class. I only went to work in Durban after 1990, after he was released. So during my tenure, this is where you have to marvel at the TBVC states, because people can say whatever they want to say about KG, but in terms of imfundo and the tertiary institution of nursing and teaching, they were up to par. It's better than trainer corner at Len Grey was, we got the best of training, where you would, sitrainer alandlela indala yoba uye on block for 2 months, the rest of the time ubese warding. So I never felt the brunt of apartheid because I was sheltered, so to speak.
You were in the Transkei.
I was in the Transkei. Yeah, I was in the Transkei.
Yeah. And kwakungabusi mabhulu ke in the Transkei. That's okay. Lovely. So on the contrary, it might have worked for you.
It did, actually, because you must remember that the other reason that, Uhundu, I call it Hundu because my Xhosa palate could not say Nkhono Kasisutu, because our next door neighbors, Orlando, were Sutu. So they would call him Nkhono. So I couldn't say Nkhono, so I said Hundu, and that name stuck as a pet name. So Uhundu, packed lock, stock, and barrel, must have been like 3 years after my father died. My father died 69, 72. We moved lock, stock, and barrel to the Eastern Cape. And it was through UKD that Uhundu bought ivenkile yakwamala.
Wow.
Yeah, wamfulela inxiwa, I mean, inxola khona, it was an adventure to me. I mean, from a 4-roomed house, here was eXhofimvaba at age of 7, in this palatial, like a farm, literally. Sinezankuku ezantsibe ezinyaweni ngathi zii-legons. And kwinkukhu, kwakuneenkukhu nenenkomo, enehagu, enegadi nje. So it was this large sprawling property, from a 4-roomed house to this sprawling property as eXhofimvaba. So it was that sheltered environment. That's why even the brunt of apartheid, the brutality of apartheid, I did not feel it, because I was in that sheltered environment of a Transkei. Yes, I mean, ubomi baseXhofimvaba was ubomi. iXhofimvaba made me who I am. Kulapho wawukhula khona uba sikhuliswa omamchawe, kukhona olandiwe Menega, abakwaBalfour, abakwaphambuka, abakwamnqandi, abakwastemela, abakwakota. So we grew up in that community where wangasoze wenza into erongo because umamkota uza kubona usenza into ezirongo and wazakubetha. So I grew up in that community where a village brought up a person. So the sum total of what you see in front of you is that Ndileka that grew up. So I'm a village, yes, I'm a village girl through and through. Khuliswa nosenga inkomo xa kuvala izikolo uhamba nisihambisa inkomo ediphini because that's how my grandmother was. So that brutality of apartheid, I did not feel. I became conscientized into politics when I went to boarding school. That's when I then started to learn that you know, I remember my then boyfriend Uthoza wayengasekomane ephuma bethi ngane la esiphunzana wayengasesiphunzana. He's the person that conscientized me into politics. No, not Esbeleni. Kwakhoza Isibele, which was part of Transkei. Ikhona la lokishi. Yeah? Yes, yes. Wayiphuma phake. So that's when I learned to be, because I partook in my first strike in 1980 when I was in Nyanga High School. Because that's when I became conscientized into politics. Because we must remember, Amangqina Jehovah's Witnesses, they are a political organization. So I grew up under a very strict religious circumstances, because as wawungakwazi noya uba sobukela ifilimu na Python khubula ukhona ikade elimnyama lifika lika Samuel Mabhunu Sabela. So ndicele ke ndithi ndicele ulamla ndithi ngizezondicela because I knew that umakhulu wayengazingeni nje ezo zinto. Afike ulamla ezondicela uthi ke umakhulu wami wayengelizwe elikhulu nje ndifuze yena ngelizwe elikhulu. Athi ndizocela uNdileka aye kwifilimu abuze ithini lo film ukuthi ithi ikade lemnyama uthi i-black cat yanto le akho Ndileka. I mean, I was so crushed. So I grew up under this religious thing that you have got to be apolitical because it is ungodly. So there I now get thrown into the deep end, a boarding school in Nyanga, 1980. And now I became conscientized into politics. That's when I started learning about politics and become active in fact, because I partook in a strike that year. And I was given a no return because of that strike.
My guest this evening, Ndileka Mandela, the author, social activist, and a leader of a foundation, the Tembegile Mandela Foundation. And we're having a chat about the great initiative that she's doing, the pressures of the name Mandela and everything. You have seen the world. And sometime this week, you posted on Facebook, I lost count of the countries that you've visited. I think it was more than 40 cities around the world that you visited personally. And what prompted those trips? You know, as I believe that traveling is development, traveling is growing. And when I saw the list of cities around the world that you have set your foot on, I was like, wow, no wonder this level-headedness. What prompted these visits to these cities? You know, just an overview.
Well, it's a mix of both. And sometimes I get asked by the Nelson Mandela Foundation to represent the family. And I remember when I met the Pope. You know, I had been asked. That was 2017. I had been asked to go and represent the family at a religious gathering, which was taking place in Assisi. Where I was to deliver a talk on the legacy of my grandfather. But also I've traveled because of the work that I do, because I believe that we can always learn from other countries. For instance, last year, I went to a country, a southern region of Italy, which is called Ferrara. Now, Ferrara is in the region of Reggio Emilia, which is a historically that has so much relevance in the history of the ANC because that's the region that housed Oliver Tambo. So I went there because of the work of the foundation, because coupled with me being a social activist, I'm a gender activist by virtue of me having suffered, having been raped by my partner in my own home. So from that time on, during the Me Too campaign, I came out 5 years later because I felt that people have got this connotation of rape, that it happens to certain people. So I went to that region of Reggio Emilia because of the work that I do, because I learned a lot there, because they had arranged different meetings. One of them was how they do agriculture. I mean, the region of Ferrara is renowned in agriculture, and also in terms of how they deal with gender-based violence, which was for me the highlight of my trip, because the center that they took me to was a multidisciplinary center where they have a politician that sits there, the person that sits inside their chamber of the region, who influences policy. You have caseworkers, you have social workers, you have nurses, and you also have people that will teach these women a skill, because oftentimes when people go, because most women that get abused, you find that they suffer abuse because they can't emancipate themselves economically. And these are people in this one under one roof. You get a person that they will be counseled. When they get there, they get a pack of what, in terms of clothing, they can even bring their children, they find them shelters. And over and above that, which was for me a plus, is that they teach them a skill, not knitting, a economical skill that can allow them to survive outside of the relationship. So my traveling, for me, whenever I travel, I mean, I work with a lady called Jill, especially in Italy, because she's a South African Italian. She came here when she was a child. She's married to a South African, but because of the language barrier in some regions, so I go with her. So, and before we go there, she will do a scope of what it is that, she will tell people, this is the work that I do, because it's through collaboration. Because even the way that Granddad work, it's through collaboration. Sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can learn from what other countries have done, what other cities have done. So for me, the travels have taught me a lot in terms of collaboration. They've also taught me a lot in terms of culture, of how people resolve certain issues. For instance, I never knew that the south of Italy, because I also went to Naples, is similar in terms of gender-based violence. It's similar. It's a patriarchal society. I remember one night with Jill, we had gone to the shops, and I'm singing to Jill. I said, "What is it with these men that are standing outside these places instead of going for it?" I said, "No, that's the Italian culture. They stand outside around 7:30. They will then go home. Typical like South African men." In the African culture, then you go home. So our cultures are similar. And also, how do you then resolve certain issues you learn from these cultures? I mean, for me, I always say Italy is, like, as you saw on my list, I've traveled that the length and breadth of Italy. And I learn every time I go to Italy, I learn something new.
Yeah. And one of the things that probably somebody picks up in traveling around the world, particularly around our beautiful mother continent, is to realize how lucky and how spoiled we can be sometimes. When you see
Talk
the
about
suffering, when you see the
Talk about
suffering, if we all got an opportunity to travel, I mean, I've not been to as many cities as you are, but the cities around the world and Africa where I have been to, and sometimes we would talk amongst ourselves with the other guys on tour and say, but do people back at home realize how lucky we are to have the things that we have? From a civilization point of view and other developmental
Yes.
factors. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're touching on the collaborations and the culture and all of that. Let's just come back home a little bit. If there is anything you would change about South Africa today, what would it be? And maybe we can tie up that question to say, if you would have an opportunity to lead, which top five priorities would we see from your office if you had an opportunity? Uba bekuya ngawe.
I said to one person one time, if I had to be president one day or 1 month, the first thing I would do is to fire the entire cabinet and start from scratch. I say that because the level of corruption that we see is unprecedented. And every day you blanch at the amounts of money. It's not 100 million, it's billions. I mean, case in point of what happened last week with the Free State thing. Now, if you look at what Edwin Sodi did, it's so deplorable that there are people that are dying of asbestosis. And this is a person that took public funds and went to finish his lifestyle. It would be to first get rid of, if you look at our cabinet ministers, there are people that have been there since Granddad's time. And Granddad used to say, for any leader to effect change, you only need 10 years. No wonder we see the rot that we see. There's nothing that new that you're going to get from these guys. They need to retire. They've done their work, and we need new blood. We need young people. And when I'm saying, I'm not talking about 30, I'm talking people your age and my age, people that come behind us. Because we are living, these people are living, they can't even relate to some of the things of the fourth industrial revolution. A case in point is we bemoan in South Africa that there are no science and science, technology, and maths teachers.
Yeah.
And yet, we can leverage off the fourth industrial revolution in terms of making sure, because government is subsidizing private schools. For that subsidy, they should mandate government private schools to say,
Private schools.
in real time, you will teach math, science, and technology to all rural schools via connectivity. Why is not happening? Why is it not happening? Why are such things not happening? That's the one thing I do. I would make sure that anybody that has made sure that they've squandered funds, they spend life behind bars. I would make sure that we capacitate schools, because it is only through, as Granddad believed, health and education is a bedrock of a thriving society, to make sure that there are proper schools, they are proper resourced, they are proper clinics in rural schools. Because people talk about peri-urban areas. Peri-urban areas are close to industry, so they get the chance to because industry, they always want a place that is close to them so that they can supervise it. So I would make sure that those rural schools are capacitated. I would make sure that those, you said 5 things, fire the entire cabinet with new people, make sure the schools are capacitated, make sure corrupt people are behind bars, tighten our borders. Because right now we are having a free for all, because our borders are porous, and because our borders are porous, we get criminal elements into the country. South Africa has become a haven for criminality because our borders are porous. That's number 4. Let me think. Number 5. What would I do as the 5th one? Let me see. Make sure that rural areas, what KD did in the rural areas, for instance, KD made sure that there was commerce and industry. Capacitate, make sure that agriculture is the buzzword, because if you look at agriculture, there is a food shortage globally, and the world is looking towards Africa because why? We have young population, we have arable land, we have human capital. So because of that, if we can make sure that in rural areas there is people get land and they are capacitated and being taught how to be commercial farmers, because if you look through time immemorial, we've always been subsistence farmers. Make sure that, you know, we even make agriculture attractive to young people, because most times young people look at agriculture, oh, and yet there's a value chain in agriculture. There's seedlings, there's food processing, there's agro processing. There's a lot of things that we can be doing to capacitate rural areas. So
Wow.
did I cover those five, right?
Yeah. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. I like that because they speak to social development, economic development, political accountability, and the moral uprightness, ethical leadership. They talk to all of those, you know, your top 5 priorities. Thanks for that. Um, COVID-19 came, and we can't say it's gone. It's still around, and it's still affecting some of the families, and has left some of our families with scars. Um, and it has denied families, you know, of what families would call an ideal send off for their beloved ones. When your aunt, Zinzi Mandela, passed away during the worst of the lockdown times, how deep and confusing was this pain in the family to have a funeral of 50 people?
You know, Patco in the Anzins, I still haven't even been to a grave, because I still, you know, it's all been a little bit in, you know, I can't believe Anzinzi is just, she's no more. She was such a robust person and full of life. I remember the morning that I learned that she died. Nangokwami I think uyakhumbula sasidibene ngala meeting yethu no Nansika no Lunga Love.
No longer,
So
yeah.
I had a bit of a cough, although I think maybe I had a bit of a touch of COVID. So I was not feeling well. So when I think called me said, and since it died, the thing is, I was a bit fuzzy. I'm thinking, was she in an accident? I said, no, she was in hospital and she had stopped breathing. But nothing had prepared me. At that time, I was still wrapping around, you know, her death. I was still processing her death. And when they said, look, when they were doing the swab, she tested positive. It only then that the penny dropped that we couldn't even meet as a family. We were talking via Zoom. I mean, imagine, you know, arranging a funeral through Zoom, but nothing prepared me for her funeral because I was sick. I couldn't go, so I partook in that link. But even then, ibhokisi yakhe zange was no puma. Yes, I was so traumatized. Honestly, I was really, really traumatized that we can't even say a proper goodbye. Not only that, you know, when Zoleka was articulating that it was just something that's inconceivable to me. And this is the trauma that people, notwithstanding that, you can't even have proper therapy, proper mourning. You can't process the death. You can't even have, I mean, and Zinzi died at the, like you say, at the brunt of this COVID. And it's something that even as a family, we still have not dealt, I have not dealt with it. To this day, I still have not been to a grave because I know that I'm going to literally break apart. I'm going to literally just break apart. Because Anzinzi, he's, you know, Umazet, that's basically Umazet was not an aunt to my Dabs. Impinjami, is a person that I could go to him with anything and everything, and she would never judge me. She was that type of person. She, Anzinzi, from the time that I first met her, she's always been that warm, bubbly person. And oh, that was who she was. And for her to receive a send-off like that is actually so cruel to her personality, to the person that she was. And it's and I know it's something that many families cannot even wrap around their head.
This conversation is. I actually feel that even the 2 hours would never be enough having a conversation with you. But for the next few minutes, I'll try to be as diverse as possible, because I know that you're a busy person. Busy as you are not a difficult person, a very humble person, an accessible person, and thanks for that, Madlomo. With all the Nelson Mandela organizations of social justice, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, the International Nelson Mandela Day, 18th of July of the 67 Minutes campaign, and the 46664, to mention but a few. Where does Ndileka play a role so that njengoba zihamba nje siyazi ngokuba inesandla ke sika Madlomo noko ke le?
In all the organizations that are involved with Granddad, Children's Fund, I'm involved with it in terms of fundraising. Nelson Mandela Fund and Nelson Mandela Center of Memory, which is the NMF, as you know it. Very involved. I mean, I have a very good relationship with Silo. That's why I end up in certain countries, because if they can't find a person, they always know. Sometimes Silo would say, Sisi, I'm sorry to do this to you, but you have to fly to Kai in a week's time. I said, Silo, seriously. I mean, recently early this year, I had a trip that was, I was to go to Egypt for my book, for a book fair. A week before I go, Silo calls me and says, Sisi, they are unveiling a statue of Madiba in Ivory Coast. Can you go for us there? So Silo knows that at the drop of a call, he knows that I can drop anything that I'm doing. If it has to do with Granddad, I will have to do it. And I feel it's my responsibility. The legacy institutions that Granddad left as the first of the first, it is my responsibility to make sure if anybody raises their hands to say, we need family intervention, I am there to lend a hand, whatever it is, because that's the legacy of who I am. That's the stock that I come from. I can't relegate that responsibility to somebody else.
Well, part of what would ideally be or should be upheld in South Africa, not only by politicians, in all sectors of our society, it is a phenomenon called ethical leadership, which Granddad and the rest of his Kimsake, the Rivonia trialists, lived for. Ethical leadership. How much are we doing with today's leaders in South Africa across the board? How much are we doing to model ethical leadership for the young and upcoming, for those that are watching us from university, those that are watching us from the lower structures, the youth formations, and all of that?
Okay, thank you that you actually had to mention that. One of the things that I have recently done and is to have a program called Leading Like Mandela, which talks to what we're talking about: ethical, moral leaders with a moral compass. Now, Leading Like Mandela is a leadership framework that has 8 components in it. And we've now registered that as a course, and we are busy in talks with certain institutions The University of Kazakhstan, for instance, if it was not for COVID, I would have been there to anchor it in one of the universities. UJ is one of the universities that we're speaking to, and also VETS, and it's also going to form part of a VETS business school. Because one of the things that I always tell people is that Granddad learned to be the leader that he was from the time that he was a child. And leadership is built. Leadership, you can't learn to be a leader as an adult or as a head of industry.
Or during elections.
Or during elections. Being a leader is an everyday thing. Granddad learned to be the leader that he was by watching tribal cows. So throughout the spectrum of his life, Granddad would find mentors. He goes to Johannesburg, he goes to Forte, he finds Oliver Tambo. He goes to Johannesburg, he finds Walter Sisulu. So throughout his life, he had these mentors. So throughout a person's life, you have got to have mentors. But we need to have another program where I will then unpack the leading. How is leading like Mandela structured, and what it is that, because for me, I believe that we need to build the next Walter Sisulu, the next Oliver Tambo, the next Julius Nyerere, because we don't have those people. We don't have. Africa stands on the shoulders of humanitarian giants, people that were larger than life. Your Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie, your Patrice Lumumba. Who are those Patrice Lumumba? Who is the next Stephen Bantu Biko? We need to be, and leading Mandela is the entry point into a leadership development of housing African leadership as we know it. Because if you look at other nations, they have a certain type of leadership, Chinese and. We need to have our own brewed here in this continent of African leadership, because we've had excellent leaders in Africa.
Well, Madlomo, thank you so much. I mean, because of time, I probably will ask you one parting question. We've covered that which we could cover. If there's a need for a part 2 sometime in the near future, we will come back and maybe zoom into the ethical leadership phenomenon or philosophy. Maybe somebody is curious to know what is it that Ndileka Mandela does today for a living. Probably is at these organizations all you do, running the Tembekile Mandela Foundation and being involved in Granddad's foundations, and is that all that defines your Mondays to Saturdays or Sundays to Saturdays?
And also, motivational speaking. And prior to COVID, I was, scheduled to go to Kazakhstan, to Ukraine, a host of countries as a motivational speaker. I mean, now in November, I was to receive an award for the work that I do with HIV/AIDS in Germany. But that did not happen because in Berlin, I was due to go to Berlin, and this is some total of what I do. I'm a motivational speaker, be it in terms of gender-based violence and also in leadership development. So this is, and the Tembekile Mandela Foundation. I don't have a 9-to-5 job. This is pretty much what I do, live for the organizations and the program that are espoused by the foundation, and also do motivational speaking.
Wonderful. I mean, Tabiso Mlunguza wrote to us and says, "Uceli session on leadership and
yes, no. It is because leadership underpins development, because good governance attracts funding. If there is no good governance, you cannot attract funding, and therefore you cannot grow as a country.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Good leadership attracts funding. I like that. Attracts investors and also sustains investor confidence,
Sustainable.
yeah, sustain as well. Well, wow, Madlomo, thank you so much, and thanks for making time for us. And people that would love to book you to speak, you know, um, some of the people that speak will say, "My voice, your invoice." People that would love to book you to come and speak, are you on social media? What are your pages or handles or all of that,
Okay.
where they can drop something and say, Madlomo, we want you.
Okay. Facebook, Ndileka Mandela, I keep it simple. Also on Instagram, you can DM me, and people that have been my friends on social media, bayazi into yoba ndiyaphendula umthetho wami, ndiyathanda uthetha, ndithanda abantu, ndithanda uthetha. So if you drop me an inbox via Facebook or you DM me via Instagram, Twitter, I'm not so much active on Twitter because it's a space, endingasithandi kakhulu because there's too much negativity and toxicity. So I want spaces that where I can effect change, where I can change a person's life, even if umntu uthi nje sisi ndicela nje uze ndifuna ukubona nje, just to touch you. If that can change a person's life, let it be.
Well, there you are. If you're looking for Madlomo just to be touched and get a hug, social distance, angazi ke noyenza kanjani-ke xa nibiza
No, not now with social distancing. I mean, I went to the US one time. I took pictures with 500 people, individual pictures. I thought to myself, Jesus, this smile is gonna crack it sometime. But you know what? If you can change the person's life, but that was also linked to the work that I do, because for each picture they donated funds to the foundation. So for that, I can smile.
Lovely. I believe in people who live to inspire others, and I must say that you are one of those. Certainly one of those people who live to inspire. There are hundreds of thousands of South Africans that are living under depression, and they need a reason to smile and a reason to wake up and look forward to something. They need inspiration, and because of that, I salute you, my hero. Therefore, Madlomo, you are inspired to inspire, and this is what I write about in my book as well. That the greatness in you is greatness in others through you. Through your inspiration, you produce other great people, because your greatness rubs on to other people. Thank you so much. Enkosi kakhulu ke Madlomo.
I look forward to hearing from you, even if I wasn't just sometimes you just need a listening ear.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. My guest for today. Every Thursday, we invite a South African leader to have a conversation with the main aim to learn, to grow, to develop, to be inspired, to be motivated, to be encouraged, so that no one of us gets to be so depressed because of whatever, and they end up kwizinto ezifana no suicide and all of that. I am so inspired. Thank you so much. You might have thought that we're doing it for the audience, but I am also personally inspired, from the conversation. I want to thank you again. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good night, ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Madlomo.